Hi, welcome into this college sports hive. I'm Leif Thulin. This is the Thulin Takeover Thursday, and I'm really happy to be joined by a guest, JT Wistrcill, who I have spoken a lot about college football with here, and we've been talking a lot about college basketball, but we're going to be talking about some of those stars of college football that Scott and I talked about in the past with JT, who's done extensive searching and studying of film, and we're going to talk about the quarterbacks of the NFL draft, which is one of the deepest classes. I'm really excited to pick your brain on this one and welcome in.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me, Leaf. Always down to talk quarterbacks. It's the most important position, obviously, and it just always changes the landscape of the NFL where these guys will end up. And this is an unbelievable quarterback class, the best we've seen in a while. I think this class could be the 2018 class with Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, even like what that class was supposed to be. I think this one has an even better chance to be. I'm really high on this class.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a unique class in the sense that you've got guys at the top tier, and I'm sure we'll get to those in just a second. We've got top tier guys that you're going to fill in your top three, top five picks, and that you've got a lot of depth. And then you've got some guys that had really good college seasons that propelled themselves into having a chance to be top 10 picks that I don't think we saw coming. So right off that, I'm gonna just take you to the one that I assume that everyone's gonna see: Trevor Lawrence going to the Jaguars. I know there are a few people out there that think that there are others ahead of him, but I want to get your read on Trevor Lawrence, just what you think of him as a prospect, so maybe a comparison, and just your thoughts on him as a whole, and we'll just kind of go through the kind of the mock draft order, what we think is going to happen in terms of the quarterbacks, and just take me through your thoughts for each one.
He really is a dream prospect, honestly. It's hard to find a flaw with him. He really can make any throw. He's big and tall, so he fits that prototype as well. Big hands. He can move really well. We saw that in the 2019 semifinal game after he got smacked by Sean Wade, got ejected. We saw him use his wheels there. He's used his wheels a lot, and he uses it very well. Can extend the plays, can rush for the first downs. Like I said, really can make any throw. He can hit the deep. He can hit over the middle, sideline, everything. He's been surrounded by some really talented receivers, but he's maximized those guys to the best of his ability. Every once in a while, if there is a knock on Trevor, I think every once in a while he'll miss a throw. But then he'll miss a throw, and the very next play he'll come back and hit you with a 40-yard bomb. So it's like, is that really a knock if you can make a mistake and then make up for it right away? It's not a big one. It's more of a nitpick, I think. So I really think Trevor is a complete prospect. There's so much to love about him and really not that much to dislike about him. And honestly, when you factor in the size, the length, all of that stuff, I really struggle to come up with the comps. So I said Andrew Luck just because he's the best prospect since Andrew Luck. And I didn't do a ton of work on Andrew Luck, but I know you have, Leaf, and you know a lot about Andrew Luck. So I thought you could kind of talk about that and not how similar they are even, but just, I mean, do you think he's the best prospect we've seen since Luck?
Yeah, I think he's certainly the best prospect since Andrew Luck. I think they're very different. I think Andrew Luck was a more like NFL tailor-made quarterback. Like, he was what the prototype was. He was big. He was fairly mobile. He could throw all the throws. He was extremely accurate. I would say Andrew Luck was a better NFL prospect, but even that is like a compliment to Trevor just because how close he is. Like, he this is not a far off thing. One thing that differentiates Trevor and Andrew, in my opinion, is that Andrew Luck is looking to make all the reads at the line, makes a lot of check downs, a pro style offense, and I feel like you alluded to this. He had great receivers, but he maximized them. I think Andrew Luck maximized his receivers, and because he wasn't dealing with the best athletes, that he made them look better than they were sometimes. We saw Kobe Fleener was a tight end at Stanford, where he was excellent in the NFL. He had some decent years with Andrew Luck, and then he fell off. He went to the Saints with Drew Brees, and he still wasn't a great weapon, but he was a great weapon in college. The one thing I'll say about Trevor is that I think his legs are better than Andrew Luck's. He's got these very long strides. He reads the read option really well, and he runs out of it as well as throws out of it. And you mentioned something interesting about Trevor that I've noticed as well is he'll make a mistake, or I wouldn't even say a mistake, something where it's like, oh, he could have gone to this read. He could have gone 8 yards here, and he'll go for a big ball. And then he'll get to 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, and then you get 20 yards. And to me, like you said, that's a nitpick. It's something that honestly I'm okay with because you feel like he can make that throw. Like, it's all in his capacity. If he misses one, so be it. Like, inaccuracy is going to happen. So yeah, he's my number one. The Jaguars, they have Urban Meyer. I think Urban Meyer, a large reason he took this job is the availability of Trevor Lawrence. If there's something, I know we listen to some podcasts that are really high on other quarterbacks that I'm sure you're going to allude to in a minute here. I wonder if there's something that would, other than just professional diligence, that would lead the Jaguars to anything but picking Trevor Lawrence.
I feel like there's some alternate reality where Zach Wilson could be better than Trevor Lawrence. But it is such a shot in the dark and the risk. And I mean, you already feel so confident in Trevor Lawrence. I don't think it's worth the risk. I think there's a slim chance that Zach Wilson's better. But there's no way I'd pass on Trevor Lawrence. I just feel too good about him. Zach Wilson could still bust and be he could be the guys that we really look at. He could be the fifth worst of the guys too. Or there's, like I said, slim chance he could be the best. Trevor, it's hard to see a world where he's if he is somehow the second worst, there's no way he's the third. He's just too good. And like you said, Urban totally took this job because of the chance to draft Trevor. I do think there's some nice things with Jacksonville in place, one of those being another first-round pick they have in this year's draft. So it's going to be fun to see what they build down there, because I really think you can write it in ink. There's no way you pass on him. And if we're going to throw in the last thing, we've talked about this before with basketball, the politics will factor into this discussion, because if you pass on Trevor Lawrence and he's everything he's supposed to be, everyone's going to get fired. It's as simple as that. So I think for those reasons, they're going to take Trevor Lawrence undoubtedly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% there. And one other thing I want to touch on, we talk about a lot of his physical attributes. One thing that I thought stood out with Andrew Luck as someone who's watched a ton of Stanford football, watched the Indianapolis Colts, is his leadership, his mental intangibles, what he calls at the line. And speaking of Trevor Lawrence, I believe Lawrence is very good at that thing, at those type of things. He's a really good leader. He's mature beyond his years. He came in as a freshman and beat an Alabama team 44-16 in a title game. Like, that just doesn't happen when you're a true freshman in college. You go in the next year and you play Joe Burrow and an LSU team that was unbelievable, and you're in that game. You have a huge hit against Sean Wade that you talked about, come back and beat the Ohio State team that was beating Clemson, or I think they were leading Clemson at that point in that game too.
I think, yeah.
And so I think he's just got this resilience. He's got this enigma. He's a leader. So I think he fills out all the boxes. And like you said, I think that there's too much riding on this pick for them to pull a shocker. Maybe if it was the fifth pick, you could go like, okay, maybe I'll take the lower one because we feel really good about Zach Wilson. But I think you got to go Trevor Lawrence. So unless there's anything more you want to add to Trevor Lawrence, you want to talk about Zach Wilson? Because I know you've done extensive research on Zach Wilson and have some pretty high praise for him.
Yeah, I'll just say on the last thing on Lawrence is you hit on the leadership thing. That is something we need to talk about. You never heard a story about that guy getting in trouble. Love the way he stepped up to and was one of the guys spearheading the, no, we're going to play this fall. Just shows his passion for the game, that he wanted to be there and is a leader. But as you said, let's shift into Wilson, because gosh, he's fun. I'm a Utah fan, and I have no reason to like this guy. And I didn't watch as much of him as some of the other guys from the season, but when I really dove into it, man, I was just so impressed. I really see a guy who has the talent to be a top 5 quarterback. In fact, I have a comp for him what I think he's actually going to be, but if he's a bust, I think he's Ryan Fitzpatrick, because I think he's so much fun and going to make lots of plays. There is just potential for turnovers, but I want to stay with the positive first. He does so much. He is one of his arm is maybe even a little stronger than Lawrence's, because he doesn't even get his feet. He can throw off his back foot. The different arm angles and stuff like that are also extremely impressive. He is really accurate. You will not find many times he misses his guys. As you kind of talked about with Lawrence, there are times he'll do it, but it's not that often he does do it. So you got to give him credit there. He can move as well. And he's a guy who isn't looking to run. Like, as soon as everything breaks down, he's not like, okay, the first thing I want to do is run like a Trey Lance. As soon as anything breaks down, Trey Lance is going to run. With Zach Wilson, he's going to still try to wait a little bit longer and give his receivers time to roam around a little bit more. And then, okay, now I'm going to run because it's the only thing left to do. He's really good at buying time. He is really accurate all over the field. He's really good at lofting it over defenders. He makes big time throws. He can step up. I know the lack of competition is a concern, but we're projecting him for how he's going to do at the NFL level. And there's a ton of NFL throws across his body that just, when you watch his film, he makes you pop in a way that you wouldn't expect from a guy who went to BYU, just because that's not a place known for quarterbacks since Steve Young all those years ago. And my only big negative with him is the turnovers. That's the only thing I'm a little concerned about. I just saw signs of that, and I thought he was better about it his senior year. His worst game of the season, the Coastal Carolina game, the interception was an end-of-the-half throw, so that one's not really on him. But there are signs of chances he takes and stuff like that. Trying to buy time can be a dangerous thing. We still see Deshaun Watson take bad sacks because of how much time he tries to buy. And there were a few instances of some bad fumbles as well. So that's the only big knock with me on Wilson. And I am really high on him. And if I had to bet, I do think he'll be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And my comparison for him is a combination of Kyler Murray and, honestly, I'm going to say it, a worse version of Patrick Mahomes because of the arm angles and the off-platform throws he can make.
Yeah, and that's high praise, but I don't think it's ridiculous because I have a few things I want to get to in this, and I'll start with the positive, like you did. One is that even watching him in his freshman and sophomore year, which were, I mean, people in the state of Utah, where we're from, say that Tyler Huntley was a better quarterback. I know we're not on that same train, but in Zach Wilson's sophomore year and Tyler Huntley's senior year, Zach Wilson was undoubtedly the better quarterback. He has all the abilities, but the team matters in football. You can't have a great quarterback without a great offensive line. His offensive line got better. His weapons got better. They played a worse schedule. And I think that what happened is he matured, and then his team got better with him. And you saw all that talent you saw in those plays, like you mentioned, that he extends plays and then he gets hit, and he's susceptible to making some of those plays that you're like, man, I wish I could take that out of him. But in the same vein, he makes those plays where you're like, wow, he should take a sack. Oh, he should throw it away, and then he escapes and he makes a great play. And I think there's a healthy balance there. That if you can coach it out of him, but you also don't want to coach it out of him because it can make some great things happen. But one thing I want to point out here is that actually is a concern of mine. I would not say his tendency to hang in the pocket is really a huge deterrent for me. But one that is a deterrent is a lot of people talk about Trevor Lawrence or Mack Jones or Justin Fields even being like, oh, wow, their talent is so superior to who they're playing, and so it makes it easy for them. I would argue that is most true about Zach Wilson in the sense that in his junior year, his best year, he had a team that was supposed to play a very difficult schedule, but then they played a schedule that you saw their best opponent was Coastal Carolina. No disrespect to Coastal Carolina, but that's not somewhere where you get the best recruits. And you don't know how he's going to fare against NFL caliber athletes. So I think that his top receiver, Dax Milne, is going to be an NFL receiver. Hasn't seen a lot of these corners that can really make him work. He hasn't seen some fronts that get past his offensive line that's extremely mature, coming off of LDS missions, older, stronger. So my only concern about him is, one, how does he lead? I think I've heard some conflicting things there. And two is, how does he fare with NFL athletes, because he hasn't played with or against too many of them. So those are my concerns, and I'll open that up to you. Do you share the same concerns, and how worried are you about those type of things?
I'll be honest, I'm not really worried about the lack of competition. It's bitten guys in the past, but also like Patrick Mahomes, the Big 12 we're talking about. Yes, those defenses are maybe a little better, but we're not talking about NFL DBs there either. And he's gone up and lit it up as well. And obviously Mahomes is a superior talent to him, but just an example. And what I look for more than I recognize the lack of kind of those really good defenses that he played, but at the same time, there's just so many throws where I'm like, that's a difficult throw to make, and he does it. And that's what I want to judge him off. It would have been great to see him play some better, even defensive coordinators who really would have challenged him and done some things that really make it difficult. I would have loved to see that. I would have loved to see him play some better defenses in that regard. But also, I think if we're going to do the bigger school thing, if Zach Wilson was on a bigger school, those teams might have had a little bit of a stronger run game. And you talked about those receivers were pretty good, but especially in the Coastal Carolina game, I counted 4 or 5 drops that Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, for example, those guys probably come up with. So if we're going to put him at one of those schools, I think that concern does disappear. So I'm not as concerned about the competition, because I'm just like, is that a difficult throw? Yes or no? And could some of these other quarterbacks make that throw? And when I say is no, I don't think so. I think only Trevor Lawrence and Wilson could make those throws. That's why I give him the slight edge there. The leadership thing, yeah, I don't think he's the same leader as Lawrence. And the fact that they did open it up to a QB competition this past summer probably shows that he didn't have complete command over the locker room. But I think also when you get to the NFL, you get more confident. Wilson continues to get better. I think that's something that can be fixed. And we have seen guys who aren't necessarily the greatest leaders. I'm going to say Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think he's the greatest leader, still be able to make it to the Super Bowl. And obviously Wilson is a far superior talent to anything that Garoppolo even resembles. But that's just the big thing for me. Is I think Wilson is just too talented where the leadership isn't as a concern for me. But I do think those are some valid concerns, especially the competition one, because you would have liked to see him play a little bit of a better defense.
Yeah, and I'm with you right there on that one. So I think these are the top 2 for me. And I think we're agreed that Lawrence is heading to Jacksonville. Where do you see Zach Wilson going? This is a tougher decision than a lot of mock drafts would lead you to believe, because the Jets do have Sam Darnold. They have their franchise. They could have a franchise left tackle in Mekhi Becton. They're looking. They could go for Penei Sewell. They could go for Jamar Chase. So these are some guys in this draft, but there are also other landing spots if the Falcons so choose to move on from Matt Ryan. So where do you see the range, or if you can pinpoint a landing spot for Zach Wilson?
I'd be surprised if he didn't go number 2. Now, I'm not going to say I wouldn't be surprised if he's not a Jet, because the Jets are the most fascinating team in the draft for me, because Joe Douglas is a former offensive lineman, their GM. He wants to build a team. He doesn't want to just he doesn't want to just do the quarterback thing. He really wants to prioritize and build a team. He wants lots of resources. It's probably why they haven't traded for Deshaun Watson yet, because he feels like if I trade for Deshaun Watson, I have to give up all these assets. Versus if I trade away this number 2 pick, which I really think is likely the more I think about the whole Joe Douglas angle of this, just the haul they're going to get. Because I look at a team like Carolina sitting there at 8. All we've heard about Matt Rule is that he wants to move up and get that guy at QB. That guy is Zach Wilson to me. So I think that's another likely one. Maybe if him falling to 4, I'd be surprised. So I think even Atlanta might have to move up. So I think he's going number 2. I just don't know if it's the Jets. And the other thing, if we're going to talk him versus Sam Darnold, I'd go Zach. I like Zach a little bit better as a prospect, just a little bit, but it's really close between the two. But a big factor is, hey, if it's close, do you want to pay Sam Darnold all this money, or do you want to have Zach Wilson on a rookie deal if you think it's close? So there's a lot of factors that are going to go into Joe Douglas's decision. It's one I don't envy, but I really do believe Zach Wilson's going to end up going number 2 overall.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel on that one, and I think I'll do some more studying as to their situation, because I love Penei Sewell. I think that's a really good idea. You got 2 great tackles potentially there, and then you have a talented quarterback in Sam Darnold, and then you could build out from there. But we don't envy that position. But here's another one. You can play the GM here of this podcast for a moment. Who do you want to take over? You want to go with Justin Fields or Mack Jones up next? Because this is a decision that a lot of GMs in the NFL will be making. And who do you want to break down first?
I'm going to go with Justin Fields, because if I'm a GM, this is where the risks come into play, right? I want to swing big. You got to swing big to win big. Mack Jones has the highest floor of almost any of these guys outside of Trevor Lawrence. But Justin Fields has one of the highest ceilings, along with the Lawrence and Wilson. So I think let's go with Fields. And if I was a GM and in that position, I'd probably slide with Fields, because I get enamored with what he could become, versus I feel like I really know who Mack Jones is going to become.
Yeah, no. I think I'm not sure which team. So I think that's all team dependent, and we can probably talk about that soon. But let's dive into Fields here. What do you see from a guy in Justin Fields that for a long time was rumored to be 1A, 1B with Trevor Lawrence? I've always had Lawrence ahead, so I think most people did. So let's just say the projected number 2 pick, I've seen as low as 20 in some mock drafts. So obviously there's some great things there, and so take me through some of the good and the bad of Justin Fields and what you see contributing to his draft prospects.
Well, number 1 to me is he's an escape artist. Guys get through, he gets hit, he can shake them off him and keep them up. It's a trait I love in quarterbacks, being able to stay alive in the pocket once you get hit. Zach Wilson, that's not something he's going to do. He's going to run away from guys. Fields can shake the guy off him when he's on him like that, which I think is such a valuable ability to be able to have. So I really like that. And obviously going along with that is how good of a runner Fields is. He's going to have a lot of success running at the next level, especially downfield. Where Zach Wilson, when he scrambles, he's going to have to slide. Fields could go through you still. We saw him even dunk on a few guys this year, diving for the end zone, which you always love that competitiveness out of your quarterback. So I really like his wheels. That's the biggest thing for me, his ability to extend those plays just because of the hits he's able to shake off, and that ability to get that out the pocket. Now, when he can look at his first read and hit his first read, I do think he's pretty accurate. And he throws a pretty good deep ball. He very rarely misses his guys deep. But we'll get into the concern now. I do think he does have some tendency to lock on that first receiver. And that's something that's been an issue with Ohio State quarterbacks. I know we say scout the player, not the helmet, but when it's the same coaching staff and we continue to see the same issue, it's something that has to be brought up there. And it's something that they're going to probably have to drill out of him a little bit more when it comes to Fields. So I think he is pretty accurate when that first guy's open. He's not a natural in terms of dissecting a defense from inside the pocket. That's where Mack Jones has him for me. He's going to go like, okay, I can get to my first, second, and third read quicker than Fields can. I think his mental clock and the way he processes it is a little bit quicker. But for Fields, it is that he has the legs as we talked about, and he is still pretty accurate when he can hit that first guy. And when he gets out of the pocket, he can still make some really nice throws. He's got a pretty strong arm, and there are signs of that accuracy there. And there are still moments he does find that second read. The other thing is, hey, if your first read's open all the time, which it usually is when you have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, I don't want to criticize him too much for that. So that is a concern for me, and it's why he's third, but I still really like him. I think he's going to develop into a really good quarterback. And for me, he has profile similarly to Cam Newton because of that size, the ability to shake off defenders, the ability to run. And we know Cam has a pretty good arm too. He's not the most accurate guy, short distances and over the middle of the field, but he could get it done deep and was still good enough to get it done in general. Won an MVP. So I still really like Justin Fields. He's just the third quarterback for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that take in general. I guess I'll give a little quick synopsis of things that I think you touched on and I think I can elaborate on. And one thing for me is that he's a guy who has played a lot of great big-time games, some prime-time games. Whether they're close or not is another story because Ohio State is a very good team. Sometimes they win against Penn State and they win handily, but that was still a prime-time game. It meant something. And then he played in the national championship this past year. He won it. He played a phenomenal game. I'd say probably the best game of any of these three quarterbacks was his game against Clemson, and that's at the biggest stage you can do it, really. So I think that he's one of those guys that when he's on, he's on, and I really like that because you know that if your quarterback's on a game, he can get extremely hot and win you a lot of games. I think there are some issues with consistency. We saw him struggle against teams like Northwestern this past year, like Indiana, who were able to penetrate Ohio State's pass protection. And I think a lot of that is what you said about Ohio State. I think that because he's used to such great receivers, it sometimes makes it hard for him to move off the reads because he's accustomed to having this. So that is a knock for me. And I think another knock that I have is I feel like he's best in it once he's hit. Like he kind of gets invigorated by it, and that's something that concerns me because if he's like I don't want to say lackadaisical, but if he's in a game where he's not fully mentally engaged, not fully competitive, sometimes you can get away with that. But in the NFL where the competition's more even, I think that he might want to start using a little like some of the smarter routes, like some shorter routes. And whereas once he gets hit and then he goes off and he throws like, I'm going to throw a dart here. I'm going to throw a dart here. I'm going to throw a dart here. Oh, and then I'm going to throw a deep ball to Chris Olave and he's going to run past the defense. I just think that there's some systematic things that whether it's Ohio State or himself, that concern me a little bit, but the NFL GMs, you have to think about the value of his potential. I mean, I've seen him run, and he's really fast. I've seen him in some rumors say he runs a 4.3. While I'm not sure I believe that, regardless, he's extremely fast. You have more options. Ohio State didn't really run him as a read option guy, but you're seeing teams succeed that way. Like I think he's a better thrower of the ball than Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's quite the runner he is, but he certainly can run. Like it entices me. So I'm with you there. I think that he as a prospect is one of those ones that will be divisive between rooms. That you're going to see some draft rooms say like, wow, this guy's awesome. And some will be scared off by the Northwestern game. But I've got one that I feel like a lot of GMs are going to really like. And I think he's been moving up, and that's Mack Jones. I think Mack Jones has really elevated his stock throughout the season, but also in the offseason, he goes to Senior Bowl after winning a national championship. I think that just reflects well on him. Take me through your thoughts about Mack Jones.
Extremely accurate. I think it's the one thing we don't give him enough credit for, honestly, is yes, he was in this unbelievable supporting cast, but there are not many missed throws. When the guys are open, he hits them, which yes, we can say, oh, he had time, the guys got open, but at the same time, it's just like, where's the time he missed them? It's really hard to find in general. He also has phenomenal ball placement. We saw so many of those Devontae Smith highlight catches. The ball was placed perfectly where only Devontae Smith could go up and get it and make that grab. Same thing for Jalen Waddle hitting a bomb to him deep. Those type of things. I'm just so impressed with him in terms of that. Also, I think Mack moves really well inside of the pocket. I think he is good at that. He's not great at getting outside and extending the plays, but when you're talking about, okay, I got to step up in the pocket, I got to shift to the right a little bit because there's a defensive end. One of my defensive end offensive linemen are kind of tangled up. That's what he's really good at. And I do think he has a pretty good arm. It's not some special arm of Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence's caliber, but he is able to get some good air under it and is pretty accurate deep as we kind of talked about it. Like that. So that's the only concern really is he doesn't play as much backyard football, if you want to say, just like, hey, I'm going to run around by time all day. That's not really his game. And that's the only real issue I have with him, because even with guys in his face, I still think a decent amount of time, I saw him be pretty accurate with the ball still. And accuracy is still the most important trait to me. He's not the best athlete. So yes, he can run for a first down if everyone's going deep, I guess, but you're not going to rely on that and really call quarterback runs versus that's what you can do with Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence per se, because of how big and physical they are as good runners. So I really do like Mack Jones. The accuracy is the biggest thing that stands out to me without being a top end athlete. And because of that, he's Kirk Cousins to me. Now, some people may hear Kirk Cousins go, Kirk Cousins, why would I take Kirk Cousins in the top 10? Well, I believe Kirk Cousins is actually a top 10 quarterback. So to me, it's a huge compliment. Kirk Cousins is a guy who doesn't win with his athleticism, but whatever is there to be taken, Kirk's going to take that and make the most of those opportunities. And that's what I think he really excels at. So I'm a big Mack Jones believer, and I do think he deserves to be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And one thing that I really appreciate in Mack Jones is how good he is in the pocket. We talk about his lack of athleticism as a negative, but I think he almost turns it into a positive, that his footwork is pristine. He gets the ball out early. He's excellent at reading. He goes left to right or whichever read, 1, 2, 3 in split seconds, and he finds the ball out very, very well. I think that he might be the third quarterback taken. I think that him and Fields, it's a toss-up at this point, and I don't think entering the season that was even considered to be close, and that's just a testament to how well he performed. Not only Alabama performed, but he performed. So I like the Kirk Cousins comparison. I think that is a compliment in the sense that it's the analytical brain somewhere where he makes decisions super fast. And he doesn't have the athleticism that is so that GMs are infatuated by right now. But I will ask you, what teams do you think? I know like a team like the Steelers or something, or the Patriots is a common like landing spot for people to project them, because they're like, oh, they've got good coaches, they got a winning culture, and it's a nice transition. But what team do you think has a chance at him? Because I don't think either of those teams do. I think he's going to be in the top 10.
Exactly. I think even going back to Justin Fields, we talked about it. Fields goes off the board at 4 to Atlanta, which I do really like that fit, because once again, he's paired with 2 dominant receivers. So I think Atlanta would be a great place for Fields to learn under Matt Ryan for a year. But when we're talking about Mack Jones, I really like Carolina. And you know who got to coach the Senior Bowl, which Mack Jones participated in, is Matt Rule. And I think Matt Rule fell in love with him a little bit too. So he's been as we mentioned, talk about go up and I need that guy at QB. Well, what if you could sit back and have that guy fall to you? I think there is definitely a chance Mack Jones were to fall to 8. Maybe a team knows, hey, we got to get in front of Carolina in order to make sure they don't get him. But I really think 8 is a really good spot for him, especially when you talk about the receivers he has there. And DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel might be a free agent. He might be gone. Also, one thing Mack excelled at is he loved having a talented back to check down new. Christian McCaffrey, I know, is another guy you love, and running backs don't get much more talented than that in the NFL, so having that there would be huge too. They'd have to improve their offensive line a little bit, but I really think 8, if Carolina sits there, that's the main one I look at. And if he were to somehow fall to those 49ers at number 12, the league would be in trouble, I really think, because building around Mack Jones on a rookie contract would take this team to a next level. I would expect Mack Jones to come in and be better than Jimmy Garoppolo pretty much instantly.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think one thing that really sells me on Mack is you played Ohio State, and it was early in the game. You get into the game and you're like, okay, they're both going to score, and Alabama gets that one stop, and Mack Jones doesn't have to go throw the ball deep, but he's able to push the ball on the field. They're like, oh God, we got to get a stop. And Ohio State is bringing crazy pressure that really overwhelmed Clemson. I think Alabama had a better offensive line than Clemson. So this is not to say anything over Mack and Trevor Lawrence. But what impressed me is Mack Jones, even when they're bringing a lot of pressure, was just as decisive, just as analytical. And I think that if you put him in an offense where they have checkdowns to Christian McCaffrey, where they've got a guy like DJ Moore, like Curtis Samuel, where they thrive with speed, and Robbie Anderson over the top, of course, I really like that fit. That was one I was personally eyeing, and I think that is one that will happen unless he goes higher than 8. Mm-hmm. I think that if he's available at 8, there's no way they pass on him. So those are 4 quarterbacks that we think can all be top 8 picks. Whether they all are, we're not sure. Who do you have as your 5th quarterback? Do you have Trey Lance, or do you have someone else?
I do have Trey Lance as my next quarterback. I think that's just too much potential and talent to pass on. We're going to get into some of the more safer options coming up, but Trey Lance has just got this crazy potential. Daniel Jeremiah, who's one of the most plugged-in guys in the NFL, has said going into this year he had Trey Lance over Trevor Lawrence. Now, he came back and flipped that pretty quickly, but the fact that that was a discussion at one point just shows you how talented Trey Lance is. And the biggest thing with Trey Lance is the speed. I mean, oh my gosh, he is crazy fast. In FCS football, he makes those guys look ridiculous just with his speed and his acceleration. Once he takes off like that, he's just gone. And he does have a pretty good arm. He made some nice deep throws too. When he's another guy, I think he's even more dependent on his first read. And they would literally call plays where there was almost only one read. And if that one read didn't work for Trey, then it's just, hey, just take off and run because we know no one can tackle you. Even if you just look up a highlight of Trey Lance, it's mostly going to be running highlights, which is a credit to the athlete he is. But at the same time, it is a concern. You're not going to find Mack Jones first, second, third read like that. That's just not in Trey Lance's game. Because once the first guy wasn't open, he's going to tuck it and run. And for that exact reason, I think number one, he has to play in the preseason, adjust to NFL speed. And I really don't think he's going to be a very effective starter his first year in the NFL. I think even some of these guys behind him, like the first year, it's going to look bad if you start Trey Lance. I think he is more of a developmental prospect. It's similar to how a Jordan Love was. They're not really similar players to me, but Trey Lance, just because of how a developmental prospect that would be. So the one read stuff scares me a little bit, but he does show potential of making some nice throws, making some nice reads too. And the speed is the biggest thing that gets you excited about. And for me, that's why I compare him to Colin Kaepernick, is the speed element like that he can provide. Kaepernick did have a pretty good arm too. So I think that's where I'm going to kind of land with Trey Lance. I like Trey, but you just got to be careful where you take him to be.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Trey Lance, it's the same question. It's competition. We're seeing him play teams that are nowhere near the caliber of what Clemson played, what Ohio State played, what Alabama played. And my biggest thing about him is like you said, I think he's a guy that could really use a nice redshirt year. A guy who could really benefit from a savvy veteran quarterback, and he observes their game, and he could almost do what Lamar Jackson did. And I hate to pigeonhole him in the same, like Lamar's mostly known for running, but it's the same thing. He could go where Lamar took over in week 12 or something, and he made them better, but he learned first. And I think that could really be beneficial for him. Do you have any landing spots or a range for me that you think that Trey Lance could fall in?
Yeah, I do. And it's funny. I do want to mention, it's funny you said Lamar Jackson, because in the early stages of figuring out a comp, that name occurred to me for sure, just because of the ability to move like that with the ball in his hands. It is running back like, which I know early on there were some people saying, oh, Lamar was a running back. Obviously, Lamar is even a better prospect than Lance was. But when you talk about the feet, I think in the speed, there are some similarities. As to the fit, for me, so I think there's definitely a chance he goes in the top 10. I think there's going to be GMs that are enamored with him and some who even trade up. To me, that would be a mistake. And I think he's much more comfortable in the team's range. But when we're talking about the best fit, to me, it's Pittsburgh. Learning from Big Ben, I think, would be huge. Also, I think if you're a Steeler fan, you're tired of old Big Ben sitting in the pocket, really no mobility in there as well. Get a guy in there who is the total opposite of him, able to run and accelerate like that, able to really push the ball with his legs, and has the cannon as well that you loved seeing on Ben for all those years. So I think Pittsburgh's the best one, especially because it really does feel like it would be a perfect redshirt year, because it feels like this is it for Big Ben. It does not feel like it's going to continue after this year. So I think this Pittsburgh would be the ideal landing spot for Trey Lance to me.
Yeah, that's a really good location, and I would be concerned if I'm the rest of the league with the winning culture they've built there, the defense that they're going to have, and obviously he's got some dynamism to him that reminds me, like I said, about Lamar taking over for the Ravens. They're similarly built teams, and if you put a dynamic quarterback the next year as a starter, Lamar was the MVP. So I'm right there with you, and I've got some questions about him in the sense that I haven't seen him make a lot of throws. The one game this year, he didn't play his best football, and I think that could be chalked up to a lot of things, because this year is just a weird year. But also, I do question his competition far more than I question the Zach Wilson competition, just because. But it's not something that deters me from him if he performs well in an individual throwing thing. I think that's something you can adjust to, you can acclimate. So if he performs well in his pro days and in his workouts, in his interviews, I feel confident that he could. If there's a team that falls in love with him, he could even go 12 to the Niners. Like I don't think that'll be what happens, but like that wouldn't stun me if a team's like, you know what, we've got a mediocre quarterback at our helm, and we think we could improve, and the rest of our team is good. That wouldn't stun me. So I think we kind of have the same perception on that. who do you have? This is the divisive question. Is I think most people would agree that's the top five. I've seen some discrepancies. Who do you have as your sixth quarterback, and do you still have a first round grade for him, for whoever that may be?
I do have a first round grade for this guy, and I'll be honest, I hadn't watched any film on him 2 weeks ago. And one of the analysts I respect most when it comes to the NFL draft is Chris Sims, the guy who played the NFL position at still a decent level, has grown up around his dad, and I just feel like when I watch him, he really knows quarterbacks, and he really likes Kellenbond enough where he has him over Justin Fields and Trey Lance. I'm not ready to do that, and I don't have that because of what I'm about to get into. But because of that, I do have Mond above Kyle Trask, which I never thought was possible originally. So what do I like about Kellen Mond? He really takes what the defense gives you. I really think he does a really good job of that, reading the defense, going through his progressions. He's pretty accurate too. He doesn't miss a ton of throws. He does miss some throws, but he does a pretty good job overall. He's also kind of mobile. It's kind of he's a little more mobile than Mack Jones, but nowhere near those other guys. But another guy, hey, if it breaks down, he can run there. He's definitely tough too. I like the leadership he provides there as well. He's not as accurate deep or with pressure in his face, I would say. And those are the inconsistencies kind of that hold him back. In many ways, he's a worse version of Mack Jones. Mack Jones' elite trait is the accuracy of me. And Mond doesn't have an elite trait, but he does a lot of these things really well. It's why my comp for him is actually Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill doesn't blow you away with anything, but he does a lot of things really well. He can beat you with the legs. He gets guys like A.J. Brown and Corey Davis deep and across the middle. So that's where it really comes in for me. I really like Mond and the things he can provide you because I think he's a really solid quarterback. There's actually a team in particular, and I'll wait to mention them, that I'm really excited about as a potential fit for Mond because I think in the right situation, you could go to a Super Bowl with Kellen Mond. I believe that because I know Jimmy Garoppolo is getting a lot of hype on this, but if you can go to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think in the right situation, Kellen Mond can do the exact same thing.
And the thing about Kellenbond that stands out to me is I think he had 3 turnovers, and he played an SEC schedule. He played a really nice bowl game against North Carolina, and he led his team to a nearly flawless record. Their one loss was to the best team in the country in Alabama, and that was early in the year. And I firmly believe that he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I think that he can move in the pocket. He can extend plays, not at the level of some of these other guys, but he can do that, and which is what people are infatuated with these days. And he can be a very solid pocket passer. And I think he's very good at analyzing who's open and when they'll be open, similar to Mack Jones. So I too listened to that Chris Sims podcast that you referred to, and I think that he to me is a borderline first round guy. And I wonder what team would want to take a chance because those are the teams that have just played in the playoffs, deep into the playoffs. So I'm curious to hear your take. So who do you have Kellen Mond going to, and what is the situation that he would be? Because I don't think he'd necessarily be a day one starter.
To me, it's the Washington football team. I really think it fits perfectly. And it's even more so almost because of a philosophy I have. One of the most valuable things you can do in the NFL is get a quality quarterback on a rookie deal because it allows you to build the rest of your roster around him. We've seen Washington, the two most important things in general in the NFL are a really good quarterback and guys who can put pressure on the quarterback. Washington hit the second one of those out of the park. All those first-round picks they spent on defensive tackles and defensive end, Chase Young, of course, leading that group, has paid off big for them and helped them win that division last year, despite some suspect quarterback play. We love Alex Smith, the comeback story. No one was calling him a great quarterback last year. He was just getting the job done. And I think that's exactly what Mond can do and grow into a guy who can do a little bit better than that. I think he's a guy who can take advantage of some of Terry McLaurin's skills. Because if Terry McLaurin gets open, more times than not, I think Mond's going to hit him. So I think that'll be big. It's a team that's still going to be built off that strong running game led by Antonio Gibson, just franchise tag Brandon Sheriff too. They always have tough offensive linemen in Washington. They want to play to the physical, tough style of their defensive-minded head coach, Ron Rivera. So I really like Mond there. And I think it's so smart just because it would allow you to build the rest of that roster up while still having a solid quarterback on your roster. Mond isn't with these other guys because he doesn't have elite traits, but he's not with some of the bottom guys because he doesn't have any traits that really scare you. So that's why I'm pretty high on Mond and think he's a really good fit at Washington, more so because of what they could do with him at the helm.
That's a really good one, and I hadn't thought of that. And I was thinking that if Fields or Lance were to fall, that could be a potential landing spot where they'd be more immediately thrust in, and that could either go very well or very poorly. But I really do like the Kellen Mond idea of having a high floor. I don't think he has as high of a ceiling as those other guys, as you said. But I do really like that, and I think that probably rounds out the first round. I think Kyle Trask is a really interesting quarterback to analyze because he had some great talent. He had Kadarius Toney, but more importantly, he had Kyle Pitts, who was a walking like mismatch. One of the most impressive players in this draft. And if we have time at the end, we may go over some Kyle Pitts to talk about where he could go, because he could go to any of those top 10 teams, maybe. And if he falls outside the top 10, someone's getting a steal. He's just that valuable. But as for Trask, I'll lead off and give something. I want to see if you agree with it. I think that early in the season, he was more in sync and he was throwing the ball very well in locations. Whereas later in the season, I think he relied on his athletes and Kadarius Toney's yards after catch and Kyle Pitts' acrobatics. And they even had a guy named Trevon Grimes who made phenomenal catches in the red zone, who was a big target. They were extremely talented. They had a lot of guys. You couldn't gang up on them. And I wondered if his accuracy suffered because of that talent. And I wonder if that's something that is maybe something you can coach out and be like, well, now you don't have a guy that is just that dominant, so you have to put the ball in these safer spots, be safer, or if that is something that is just inaccuracy based and he was not relying on the talent, he was relying on it unintentionally.
I think he absolutely started to rely on the talent you just talked about. And Dan Mullen was a really good offensive-minded head coach too. A lot of people compare Mack and Trask because of the supporting cast around him. But I really do think a lot of the times you can see Mack go through the progression and land on Devontae Smith versus a lot of time Trask is like, oh, Tony's got him here. Oh, Pitts has got him here. And those guys are so talented. And there's a reason those guys are going to be first-round picks too. And I'm not trying to take too much away from Trask because I do think he's a pretty good deep outside the number thrower. But that's the most accurate spot, which is a little bit concerning. I think over the middle, you see a lot of missed throws and opportunities like that. We saw against Alabama, even on some of those deeper out routes, we saw some interceptions as well. So it's just kind of the concerns I have with Trask, but none more so than the fact that he's by far the least mobile of quarterbacks in this draft. The NFL is a mobile league. You need to be a mobile quarterback to win. We haven't seen the final four quarterbacks in this year in the NFL. Yes, it was Tom Brady was one of them, but he had the best offensive line. So I don't even count that one. Even Rodgers does a good job of moving around. So it's just tough in that regard. You got to be able to move a little bit. And he really is a statue in the pocket. He's not going to get outside the pocket and make those throws. So you factor in that with the struggles over the middle. Yeah, I love the ability to hit deep, and I think he's able to do that. That's where I really get concerned with him. I have him mocked to Nick Foles as a comp because I think Nick he's a pretty good leader, which I also think Trask is. He's tough and he's capable of making those big time throws in those big time moments. But at the same time, you some of those decisions, especially when he's not surrounded by the most elite talent, as we've seen Foles play on so many teams. That's where I really start to get concerned with Trask. So he had an unbelievable season. He was close to winning the Heisman at one point, I believe, just because of how many records in SEC passing records he was shattering. But just as it portrays to the NFL, mainly because of the lack of mobility and inaccuracy over the middle of the field, I think he's definitely a second to maybe even third round pick.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with what I saw as well. Another thing that concerned me, and I don't know if this is a fair criticism or not, was that he was never a starter until he inherited that job in college as a junior, as a redshirt junior, and I believe, and then he played his redshirt senior year, which was this past year, and he did a really good job. I mean, that's not an insult to him. It's just the fact that maybe talent wasn't evident. He was a late bloomer, and I'm all for late bloomers doing well in that sense. But it's just like if your talent doesn't stand out in high school, if it doesn't stand out early in college, do you think that guy is going to be an NFL quarterback and an NFL star because quarterbacks have to be stars to be considered? Or maybe that's a little harsh, but I think that NFL quarterbacks are expected to be very good to be appreciated. Because you talked about Kirk Cousins. This is a perfect example. You and I are both higher on Kirk than I think the average NFL fan is, but I would never label him a star. I think he's a very solid player. So that's something that we can appreciate is he does his job, but he's no star. And I think that there's an unfair expectation. So as we're winding down here, I think that there's a few more quarterbacks that can be in the second and third round that I know you have a sleeper. And I'm very curious to hear that. And I've got a sleeper as well. So I'll let you go and give me your sleeper and then the range you have for this guy.
This is a guy coming into this. I did not think he was going to be my sleeper, but I wanted to dive in. I'll be honest. Originally, I had Sam Ehlinger pegged as my sleeper. I've watched a ton of Texas football. I watched him rip Utah's heart out a few years ago. So originally, I was thinking about Sam. And it's kind of funny when you talk about the differences from Trask to Ehlinger, if we're going to spend a second on that, just because Trask is a guy who barely started at all and then starts a junior to senior season. We see the huge jump. Ehlinger maybe got a little bit better, but it wasn't a lot, and he was a 4-year start. So just kind of funny there. But my sleeper actually does tie to Trask because it's the guy who transferred away because they were going to give the job to Trask. My sleeper is Felipe Franks, and I really enjoyed what I saw from him on film as a developmental prospect. Number one, he's way more athletic than I gave him credit for, and he does have that ability to get outside the pocket, buy the time, and find the open guys down the field. Now, he is not the most accurate thrower, and if you get him inside the pocket, that's where I'm a little more concerned. And that's what the biggest thing of an NFL quarterback still is winning inside the pocket. But when he does get outside, he does make plays happen. And there's lots of exciting things you see where it's like, man, if he somehow he got with the right quarterback coach, I don't know, Sean McVay. I'm just talking a Sean McVay type in terms of a guy who knows quarterbacks well. Maybe they could make something out of this guy. There are definitely accurate concerns. He's not going to pick you apart. He's not the most cerebral quarterback, but he's fun because of that athleticism. He's got a solid arm and those ability to make those off-script plays happen. To me, he's somewhere in that 3 to 4 round range, but I really do like this player. And I think if I had to roll with someone outside of the guys we mentioned to be a quality starter at the next level, I'd bet my money on Felipe Franks.
That one does shock me. I see where you're coming from. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's got a big arm. He's a big guy. He makes, and I was impressed by him too. I thought that Arkansas was a lot better than I anticipated this year, that they weren't a team that I would have pegged as like a team that could compete with these guys. And they didn't because their defense was just horrendous. They gave up over 40 points a game, but offensively they competed, and that I fully attribute to him. So I like that one, and I think it's a similar range. I've got a guy that perhaps you've caught onto a train of bias here, but I think Davis Mills.
Yes.
And I will give you a reason that is not only because he went to Stanford, which is why I'm a diehard Andrew Luck fan and a diehard Christian McCaffrey fan wherever they end up. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you why I think Davis Mills is there. Not to harp too much on projected talent, but Davis Mills was second only to Tua Tagovailoa, who was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft last season in his recruiting class. He performed great in all those high school recruiting classes, those camps, Elite 11. He came into Stanford and battled with KJ Costello, and the reason KJ Costello transferred was because Davis Mills was better, and it was becoming obvious. But David Shaw, the head coach of Stanford, it has a very firm, like, we want to start the older player unless they've done something wrong. Almost like it is not punitive, but it was just that KJ Costello was still a good quarterback, and he may have a chance at the league too. But Davis Mills, that's a little bit of a tangent, but the one thing I'll say about Davis Mills is you can't teach a person to throw a ball just a good spiral and it can come out with the same speed every time. He does that at a level that I think is first round caliber in terms of just the ball comes out very well. It always comes out smooth. It comes out with pace. His athleticism was sapped a little bit because he had a knee injury in his sophomore year, and that set him back greatly. But I think it's coming back. You saw signs of him making athletic plays. He made a receiving touchdown against Oregon State that you were like, wow, that's a quarterback. Like he can move. My biggest concern about him and why I don't think he's as safe of a pick as maybe a guy like Trask, because Trask played better competition, better defense in the SEC. But the difference between them, I think, is that Trask got the ball out quicker, and I think that may be something you can attribute to Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney in the same way that we're like, wow, okay, Fields locks in on Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. I think that what happened with Davis Mills is that he would sometimes, when some reads weren't open because Stanford didn't have the greatest team this past year or the year prior, he held onto the ball, and when the pocket collapses, he isn't a scrambler or a shrug-off guy. He's kind of in between, and he freezes. But that's where I saw development towards the end of the year. Stanford started the year 0-2 in 2 games where one he did not play, and the other one he was in quarantine for 9 straight days, and the 10th day was the day of the game. And in the 4 games that he was able to have a full week of preparation and playing, they were 4-0. And you saw just this intangible lead. You saw the ball come out. He's got a cannon of an arm, probably top 5 in terms of arm strength in this class. So this is a guy that I think could get an NFL starting job at some point. I think he's got to learn, and I think he's got the mental capacity. He played in a pro-style offense. He played under a scheme that where you've seen good results. You've seen a guy like Kevin Hogan from Stanford in a couple of years ago. He made the NFL. He started a few games for the Browns, and he was nowhere near the pure passer as Davis Mills. So this is a guy that I am fond of, but also I think that if you're in the third or fourth round and you want a guy that could be a starter, and I know that happens fairly frequently, but that could be a starter and actually elevate your franchise, this is a guy I would be willing to take a shot on.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing you love about a guy like Mills, too, is a lot of those things you talked about that he does well, where if you draft him in one of those later rounds, he's a guy who even early on in his career, he can win you some of those games. When you got a backup like that, the goal of a backup has to be realistic. The goal of a backup can't be Nick Foles that 1 year, because that's just unrealistic. The goal of a backup should be starter misses a few games and the guy comes in and performs well. And I think that is what Davis Mills can do. You talked about the athleticism, the arm too, and there are things he has to improve on, which is why he's not one of these guys. But I even know Chris Sims had him over Kyle Trask and has him right behind Trey Lance in his rankings. So that's another guy he's high on as well. So I really agree with you. I like Mills, and I think he will start his career as a quality backup. And maybe the situation breaks right and he becomes Case Keenum and he is able to lead a team pretty far. So I think that's a fun one there. And definitely is a smart guy because we know when to stare.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt for a lot of NFL quarterbacks. So we've got a few minutes here where we're running out of time, but I've got one or two questions for you just that I think are fun while we stay in the offensive vein. So I'm going to ask you just a straight up question, and then I want to ask for an explanation. So I've got a question: Devontae Smith, Kyle Pitts, and Jamar Chase. Can you rank those three for me and tell me why they're in that order?
Yeah, it's tough, and I haven't done all my research on these guys too. I haven't watched every game of them, but I still watched a lot of them play. So I'll go. Oh, it's so tough. I'm gonna go Chase one. I am. I'm doing how they're projected the NFL. I am gonna go Devontae Smith 2. I'm gonna go Kyle Pitts 3, and it is really close for me. Let's start out with Chase. He was the best receiver in college football when he played. If he played this year, there's you know what? I don't know if he would have been this year just because of the drop off in quarterback talent. I mean, I lost count of how many different quarterbacks LSU went through this year. So it was a smart decision by Chase to opt out, but I think he is the best athlete among the group, and Pitts is a freak athlete for a tight end, and I'm just talking about overall. So I really like Chase. I do think he still has phenomenal hands, runs routes well, and I think because he's the best athlete, I'll give him the slight edge. But guys like Devontae Smith, man, do I hate counting those guys out who truly dominate at the college level, stayed the extra year, feisty, competitive, really good hands, a pretty good route runner. He's not the athlete that Chase is, but he's a guy who always stepped up in the biggest moment. Now, Chase did that too, but we saw Devontae Smith have one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a wide receiver. So I'm a huge fan of Smith's as well. And Pitts, I don't know. The one thing I will say is I used to play offensive line, so I always get a little bit like, I don't know if he can block at that level, but if we're strictly evaluating him as a pass catcher, there's a reason Mel Kiper has him as the best tight end he's ever evaluated, right? He's an unbelievable pass catcher. He's a mismatch all over the field. He's got strong hands, can win those 50-50 balls. And I still really like Pitts. And I think all three of those guys are worth top 10 picks. I'm a big fan of all of them, but how do you stack those guys up, Leif?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't flip it back on me, but I think I agree with you. I think I got the same order. My biggest takeaway is that Devontae Smith was able to dominate with an NFL quarterback at all times, and Jamar Chase was able to do the same, and so was Kyle Pitts. The thing is that I think there are so many good players on that LSU team that I feel like Jamar Chase was the best, but Justin Jefferson on that team, the fact that he was better than Justin Jefferson on a team, and Justin Jefferson had 1,400 yards in his rookie season, could speak to how good Justin Jefferson is, but it also to me reflects on how good Jamar Chase was and I think will be. And I think he's just got better physical attributes than Devontae Smith, which is really really picking on some little things because Devontae Smith was not impeded by the fact that he wasn't very muscular. Like it didn't bother me a bit. I think what could happen is I think we might see Jamar Chase go 3, Devontae Smith 6, and I think Kyle Pitts will be a top 10 pick. And so I think, and so for 3, that's the Jets. I'm sorry, not the Jets. That's the
Dolphins.
That's the Dolphins. That's right. And people want to link Tua and Devontae Smith, but I think Jamar Chase is the more NFL, like if you want to hit the home run, I think you take Jamar Chase. And so I'm with you on that one. I have no issue if those two are flipped. I think Pitts, the only reason he's falling is because tight end is just less value than wide receiver. So I love Kyle Pitts. He might be my favorite of the three, to be honest, just because I think he's just such an anomaly. Like, there have been better receivers that have come out. But like Mel Kiper said, like you just said, I don't think I've ever seen a tight end look this good as Kyle Pitts. He's ridiculous. So that's something to look forward to. And perhaps we'll break that down as we edge closer to the draft. This was really fun. And I know we've got we talk a lot about college basketball and the college sports hive right now, but we're getting back to football once the draft comes up. So we'll have a lot more of these, and we're going to have JT back. As you guys saw, he's very knowledgeable at the NFL draft. And I know he knows not only the quarterbacks, but he can talk about the nitty gritty, the dirty work of the offensive line, as he mentioned there, as well as the more viewed positions. I won't say valuable, but the viewed ones of the skill positions. So thank you for hopping on. This was a blast, and I'm sure we'll have you back on to talk some more NFL draft and college football.
Yeah, I really appreciate having me on. I'd love a chance to even talk about a guy like Rashawn Slater soon. We saw him front squatting today, and that is a nasty man. When you talked about Penei Sewell too, love some of those guys. This is a fun draft. We got the quarterbacks out of the way. I'm sure we'll do some mock draft type stuff in the future as well, but a lot of fun guys. Mentioned Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson as well in this podcast, so I'm going to be happy as a Vikings fan.
Yeah, I thought I'd get you a little Justin Jefferson a shout out in there and put a smile on your face, because he was one of my favorite guys of the last year. And so we'll talk some receivers soon, see if we've got any diamonds in the rough, just like Justin Jefferson. In another time, but I think that's going to do it for us on Thulin Takeover Thursday. Special thanks to JT Wistrcill, and this is the College Sports Hive. So keep tuning in. We're going to have March Madness for you, and then we'll get back to some NBA and NFL drafts, talking about our favorite college athletes that'll be moving on and continuing great productions. So thank you again to JT, and this is the College Sports Hive. I'm Leif Thulin.